Welcome to the Radiology Review Podcast, your on-the-go source for radiology education with your host, Dr. Matt Covington, a board-certified radiologist. Please follow the podcast on Twitter at RadRevPodcast. Send emails to theradiologyreview@gmail.com or visit the website theradiologyreview.com.
Welcome back to the Radiology Review Podcast. This current episode will focus on patient privacy and HIPAA, that is HIPAA, as outlined in the 2021 ABR Non-Interpretive Skills Study Guide in Chapter 5, specifically Section 5.1.2, titled Patient Privacy and HIPAA. I will make a free downloadable study guide on this topic available on my website, www.theradiologyreview.com. Please check that out if that is helpful for you. Also, please follow @RadRevPodcast on Twitter or Instagram, where I post things like tips for the physics portions of radiology board exams. Without further ado, let's get into the questions and answers for this episode. First question, what is HIPAA? And that again is HIPAA. A law enacted in 1996, HIPAA stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act and represents codified law that enforces patient privacy by establishing national privacy standards that apply to healthcare providers, plans, and clearinghouses. Under HIPAA, there is a privacy rule that establishes the national standards for protected health information, or PHI, as well as the security rule that establishes national security standards for securing PHI in electronic form, and electronic PHI is shortened to ePHI. By establishing technical and non-technical safeguards that must be in place to secure the protections outlined in the privacy rule. If, listeners, my voice sounds slightly different today, please forgive me. I am currently feeling a little bit sick. Nonetheless, the podcast must go on. Next question. Who enforces HIPAA, and what penalties can be enacted for violating HIPAA? HIPAA rules and standards are enforced by the Office for Civil Rights, or OCR, which is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. For violation of HIPAA, civil money penalties can be enacted. Next, what are the major goals of HIPAA according to the ABR Non-Interpretive Skills Study Guide? According to the ABR Non-Interpretive Skills Study Guide, the major goals of HIPAA are to protect each individual's PHI, while also permitting this information to flow to providers and organizations to provide and promote quality healthcare. It is important to remember that HIPAA is not only there to protect individual PHI, but it also specifies the means and allows information to actually be shared quite widely to flow to providers and organizations to provide and promote quality healthcare. Next, true or false? A patient's admission or discharge date is considered PHI. The answer here is true. A patient's admission or discharge date is considered PHI. Next, true or false? Geographic subdivisions smaller than a state where an individual resides are considered PHI. The answer here is true, with one notable exception. The ABR Non-Interpretive Skills Study Guide states that if a zip code has at least 20,000 people within it, the first 3 digits of the zip code can be used and not considered PHI. Next question. True or false? An individual's license plate number is considered PHI. The answer here is true. With these types of questions, you should ask yourself, is it possible from the information at hand to possibly identify an individual? And in the case of a license plate number, You could use that license plate number in theory to identify a specific person. Therefore, this is considered PHI. Next question. True or false? An individual's Internet Protocol or IP address is not considered PHI. The answer here is false. IP addresses attached to an individual are considered PHI. Again, you could use that IP address to potentially identify a person. I previously mentioned the patient's admission or discharge date is considered PHI, and I wanted to specifically mention that because it is true. Nonetheless, in my mind, it seems much less likely that you would be able to identify a specific person based on an admission or discharge date. Keep in mind that also is considered PHI. Next question. True or false? If there is a recording of a patient's voice, this is considered PHI. The answer here is also true. Biometric identifiers, such as fingerprints and voice prints, as well as full face or similar photographs, are considered PHI. Next question. True or false? Any unspecified unique identifier, characteristic, or code whereby an individual can be potentially identified is considered PHI. Hopefully this is a really easy question for all of you, but I just want to drive home that this is true. According to the ABR Non-Interpretive Skills Study Guide, after specifying specific examples of PHI, the study guide states, any other unique identifier, characteristic, or code is PHI. Let me discuss this further. According to the ABR Non-Interpretive Skills Study Guide, patient identifiers considered PHI include patient names, geographic subdivisions smaller than a state. However, again, the first 3 digits of a zip code with a population over 20,000 people is not PHI. All elements of dates except the year that are related to an individual to include birth date, admission date, discharge date, date of death, in addition to phone numbers, fax numbers, email addresses, social security numbers, medical record numbers, health plan beneficiary numbers, account numbers, certificate and license numbers, vehicle identification and license plate numbers, device identifiers and serial numbers, web page URLs, IP addresses, biometric identifiers such as finger and voice prints, full face or similar photographs, and any other unique identifier, characteristic, or code is considered PHI. If you would like to review that again in written form, go ahead and download the study guide at theradiologyreview.com. Next, true or false? PHI can be disclosed without an individual's authorization if used for delivery of care or treatment. PHI can be disclosed without an individual's authorization if used for delivery of care or treatment. This is an important question, and the answer is true. Remember, part of HIPAA is to allow necessary information to flow to provide healthcare resources. Therefore, PHI can be disclosed without an individual's authorization if used for delivery of care or treatment. Next, true or false? PHI can be disclosed without an individual's authorization if used for billing purposes. The answer here is also true. Remember that another part of HIPAA is to allow necessary information to flow to provide and promote quality healthcare, and part of healthcare delivery includes financial accounting for billing purposes. Next, true or false? An individual must consent to the release of PHI for that information to be used for law enforcement purposes. The answer here is false. for law enforcement purposes, including fraud or abuse detection, domestic violence investigations, or judicial proceedings, PHI can be released without an individual's authorization. Next, true or false? PHI can be disclosed without an individual's authorization if used for quality improvement in healthcare. The answer here is true. Part of HIPAA is to allow information to flow to improve and promote quality in healthcare. In general, PHI cannot be disclosed or transmitted to anyone other than the individual without authorization by that individual. However, exceptions to this rule listed by the ABR Non-Interpretive Skills Study Guide include that PHI can be disclosed or transmitted without an individual's authorization when necessary for the delivery of care or treatment, payment activities, and healthcare operations involving quality or competency assurance, fraud or abuse detection, or compliance. Information can also be released without an individual's authorization when required by law to public health authorities during an investigation of abuse, neglect, or domestic violence, to oversight agencies for judicial and administrative proceedings, for law enforcement purposes, and for workers' compensation. This concludes this slightly shorter podcast episode. This episode was based on the 2021 ABR Non-Interpretive Skills Study Guide, and remember, if you are listening to this episode in the future, that a more recent Non-Interpretive Skills Study Guide may be available from the ABR, and if so, please refer to that study guide for any additions or changes to this content that may be present. Also, as a reminder, a free downloadable study guide on this topic is available at www.theradiologyreview.com, so please check that out if helpful to you. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope this content was helpful for many of you. Remember to study hard. You have to study really hard to succeed on radiology board exams, so prepare to succeed. I will catch you on the next episode. Content of this podcast is provided for informal educational purposes only for radiology trainees and radiologists. Medical practitioners, please make your own independent assessment before suggesting a diagnosis or recommending any course of treatment. This podcast should not be used for self-diagnosis or self-treatment and is not a substitute for independent professional medical care. Please consult your own physician regarding any diagnosis, imaging interpretation, or course of treatment.